The 5-2 Washington Commanders welcome in the 4-2 Chicago Bears Sunday in Landover in a matchup of the number 1 and number 2 overall picks in the 2024 NFL Draft. And we have JP Flaim from the Sports Junkies to break it all down here on Ref the District. Welcome back to episode 196 of Ref the District. We are a proud member of the Believe Network, and we're happy to be joined now by JP Flaim from 106.7 The Fans, Sports Junkies. Welcome back to Ref the District, JP. We always appreciate you coming by to spend some time with us here.
Hey, congratulations on 196. It harkens me back to the early days of the Junkies when I had a notebook, and I did this for 1,000 shows.
Yeah.
And I logged every show and every guest we had on the show. And after 1,000, I was like, what am I doing?
Well, at 196, probably, since you guys did it every day, that would be like 3 months into it or something like that.
No, I think roughly we do maybe a little over 200 a year.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you're about 1 year into it already.
Yeah.
In that time you've been doing it, you guys talk about it all the time. The Washington Commanders have been terrible. You've never been able to have the sort of euphoria of a winning organization. And you say it all the time, even though you're not a fan of the team per se, you are always happy when the team wins because it just makes your job that much more fun. What do you think it's going to be like if Washington is able to go into or bring Chicago in this week, win the game, be 6-2 against Caleb Williams and the Bears?
I think there's a slight reservation in the fan base just because of the scar tissue, kind of PTSD over the years. But let's be real, it feels different. We've had little blips over time. We've been doing this radio show now for 28 plus years. And you're right. There has not been really any success. Certainly no sustainable success. Couple playoff trips here and there. I think one playoff win. I mean, when's the last time we saw a playoff win? We were talking about it this week. I think the conversation now about this Commanders team is, well, how good are they? They're a good team. So how good are they? And to me, if you look in the NFC, I'll put Detroit ahead of them. For sure, okay. Detroit looks to be the best team in the NFC. But after that, it's kind of debatable. I think you can make arguments for other teams, of course. And Washington hasn't played Philly or Dallas yet in the division. Right. But nobody's blowing me away. You know, I keep thinking San Francisco is going to turn it around, but we keep waiting and waiting. They're up, down, have a lot of injuries. So beyond Detroit, I think Washington's as good as anybody.
And is that okay that they aren't necessarily beating teams? I mean, they're beating teams handily, the teams are supposed to, but they haven't played anybody. It's a context, right? So that's why I think maybe we have to wait and see how they do against Chicago, Pittsburgh, and then you mentioned Philly and Dallas as well. Don't you really have to see them beat a really good team before we start talking about second in the NFC behind Detroit? Sure.
But what I'm trying to tell you is right now, in this moment, bask in it. They got a quarterback, number one. Now, we don't know if he's going to play on Sunday. He didn't practice today. One would be hopeful and hope that he's going to be ready to go on Sunday. But you're talking about a team that is putting up points that we're just not used to. You could go year by year and look at the point totals going all the way back to Kirk Cousins, and nobody's even close to what this offense is producing.
No, I agree. So with that being said, what has to happen on Sunday for us to make a statement for the NFL as in, like, we're a serious team. We don't beat bad teams. We actually beat a team with a winning record. Where does that start off with?
You know what? I think any type of win is going to make you feel that way at 6-2. The truth is, if you went through most of the teams that have winning records, most of them are taking advantage of situations and beating losing teams. There aren't many teams that are 5-2 that have just beaten teams with a winning record. And look, there are no moral victories. I get it. But to me, that Ravens game showed me something about this team. The Ravens, you're seeing what they're doing week in and week out. They fell behind 10-0 the other night. And then Lamar Jackson went off and threw 5 touchdown passes. They are a machine right now. And Washington hung in there with them. Now, The Ravens were a better team. There's no doubt about it. They're in the big leagues. But Washington isn't that far off, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And we talked a lot about, before you came on, we talked about a lot about the comparison between Caleb and Jayden Daniels. And they're forever going to be linked, right? Just like the Manning and Leaf and the RG3 and Andrew Luck. We're always going to be watching them. But I know you were a Caleb guy. I was a Caleb guy as well. If you had to do it all over again, right now, what you know right now, JP, would you still, if you're Chicago, would you still take Caleb number 1 overall?
I think so. I think it's still early. Look, if you want to go back to my draft board, we did a bit where we each watched like 5 minutes of film at the most. So highlights, and then we stacked them, right? I had Jayden Daniels 3rd. I had Drake May number 2. I think you have to revisit this in 3 years. Let's be real. Guys are going to have ups and downs. I brought this up on the show recently. A couple seasons ago, people were talking about Jalen Hurts being the best quarterback in football.
Sure.
He kind of stepped back last year, a lot of turnovers, and it seemingly continued this year. And nobody is putting Jalen Hurts right now in that elite class with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. Jalen Hurts has kind of slid back to the pack. So I think they're going to be ups and downs. I just know when I watched the film of Caleb, and we'll see what happens, the guy made so many spectacular plays. And that's what he has done. And he has – look, we've seen that from Jayden this year. I'm not saying Jayden doesn't do it. Jayden's been amazing. But I just know when I watched Caleb highlights, and it was just highlights, it just blew me away. It was like, this looks like Patrick Mahomes. With Jayden Daniels, you got to love everything you've seen so far. And it's the combination of Jayden with the Cliff Kingsbury offense. We saw Marcus Mariota step in there, and what do you have, 5 incompletions last week?
Yeah, sure.
That was impressive. Now it was against Carolina. I can't remember which player said it, but they said last week to prepare for Carolina, a lot of them had to look at preseason film because the guys that were on the field weren't playing the week before. They had to go back to watch them in the preseason.
So are you playing Jayden Daniels this week if he's able to go?
I mean, I would be cautious, but if the doctor said he was good to go and Jayden said he was good to go, I heard Ryan Clark say this week. I don't know that it was about Jayden Daniels. I think it was about Godwin playing at the end of the Tampa Bay game. He said, this is not Little League.
Yeah, it's football.
You're not babying him. If the guy's good to go, play him. And look, the boys on the show kill me all the time because I was anti-Strasburg shutdown.
Right.
I'm paying somebody millions of dollars. And look, there's a big difference, I think, psychologically. You guys can talk about this. Let me throw it out to you. 6-2 and 5-3. Do they feel the same?
No. There's a huge, there's a vast difference between those two.
Yeah, to me, 6-2, I understand this happened under Zorn where they had the 6-2 start and then 2-6, finished 8-8, missed the playoffs. But to me, 6-2 is pretty much fait accompli. You're going to be in the playoffs in my mind, barring some terrible collapse, which happened under Zorn. But I wouldn't expect it with this regime and with Jayden Daniels so long as he stays healthy, which
I know
apparently is a big question mark. But at 5-3, I feel like you're in a war. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So do you have any confidence in Marcus Mariota to take over the spot if Jayden can't go against this Bears team?
Not great confidence.
I
liked what I saw in this last game, but it's Marcus Mariota. I don't think he's a bum. If you look at his career, I think he's closing in on about 100 touchdowns with less than 60 interceptions. He's always kind of taken care of the football, but he's never put up big numbers. I think he's a competent placeholder. You know what I mean? Could they win with him against Chicago? They probably could win with him, but you just don't expect the explosive plays that you've gotten from Jayden. I mean, even last week, that first run, I mean, it was spectacular, and you're just kind of waiting for that. And his ability to pass is far beyond, I think, what anybody expected.
And I know you guys haven't really delved too deeply into the Bears yet. It's only Wednesday. You still got a couple of days to do that. But just kind of from the outside looking in, what sort of scares you when you think about the Bears and why they're 4-2 and what they could do to Washington on Sunday?
I think their defense is okay. It's not a fantastic, great defense, but the defense is solid. So it's far better than Carolina. But I think what would scare me is that there has been this upward trajectory of Caleb Williams. So the first 2 games were terrible. The last 4 games have been much better. And he seems to be finding a rhythm with guys like DJ Moore. DJ Moore obviously has had a good game in the past against Washington.
Yes.
So that scares me. I mean, the secondary hasn't changed for Washington. They've played better defensively against inferior opponents. So you wonder how they're going to fare against a better passing attack. So that would get me the most nervous.
All right. Let's see what else. So what do you think? Do you think the Commanders will make any moves coming up on the trade deadline? You heard, I think some reports came out that we're kind of in the background doing our due diligence quietly. Do you see us making any kind of moves outside of releasing Jamin Davis? I want you to touch on that too. Is that a shock to you as well? Kind of a
the Jamin Davis thing, let me start with that. To me, it's not a huge shock. They weren't even playing him. And he hasn't been an impactful player. And kind of what you saw with Ron, actually, and you're now seeing it with this regime, right? Guys like to have their own guys. And so they're moving on from the Ron Rivera players. If I'm Emmanuel Forbes, I'm nervous because this staff, they don't really care for the players of the past. As far as the moves, let's revisit what happened before the season. They traded Jahan Dotson for a 3rd-round pick. Some people were like, well, what are they doing? They don't have good receivers. They got to keep this guy who was a 1st-round pick. Well, look what's happened around the league. Adam Peters all of a sudden looks like a genius. Hopkins today went for a 4th-rounder.
Right.
That guy at one point was the best receiver in football.
Sure.
He's not just a Pro Bowler. I think he's a 2-time first-team All-Pro. He's a stud. Now he's 32, bigger salary than Jahan Dotson. But, I think that Adam Peters would make a move if it makes sense. I don't think they're desperate to make a move. And truthfully, it's house money this year, right? Big picture, this was a rebuild. And sure, they wanted to win as many games as possible this year. But it's not about this year. It's about the future of the team. So if the move makes sense, I think they would do it. But I don't think they're desperate to do something that's going to cost a lot.
It's not like in 2020 when Ron said they're all about building the roster and building for the future. And then all of a sudden, halfway through the year, even though I think they were 2-6 or something, they still had a shot at the division. And he decided, we're going for it. I just think it's a different attitude with this regime in terms of going for it when your whole plan is we're not going for it. We're going to build and build. And then all of a sudden, I don't think they're just going to reverse course and start picking up all these trades or guys who get released. I don't see it either, but
I think they have a long-term vision. It strikes me today we did our show from the Entertainment Sports Arena because the Wizards season is about to open up, and we had the Wizards coach on and their GM. Their GM, Will Dawkins, he strikes me as a guy who's all about the big picture. And that team, look, they're going to lose a ton of games. It's going to take a couple of seasons, but you got to keep your eye on that, right? And I think that Adam Peters is of the same mold where they know the type of players that they want. They know it's going to take a while. You're going to bring in veterans like they did this year, like Bobby Wagner, which might help you win in the immediate, but you know that they're not part of your long-term future. And so, again, if it makes sense and it doesn't cost too much, I think they'll make a move, but I don't think they're desperate to make any moves.
I agree with you. Here's a stat I wanted to give to you that we did a little research on and see what you think of this. See if you think this is fluky or if this is a trend.
Yes. I was about to ask that too, but go ahead.
All right, so
is this the Kingsbury stat?
Yeah. Have you seen this stat? I mean, I haven't seen it. I kind of went through
I'm
it all.
aware of it.
As a head coach and or offensive coordinator in his entire career, in the first 7 games, he's 68, 29, and 1. So that's a 69% winning percentage. First 7 games. From game 8 on, whatever it is, college, it might be a certain number of pros, including playoffs. Game 8 on, he's 30 and 60. That's a 33% winning percentage. That's not 1 year. That's not 2 years. That's like 10 years. And that includes here in Washington where he's 5-2 in his first 7. You think that's a fluky thing? Or is that a trend and we better sort of watch out for that here in the second half of the season?
I think when you bring up that amount of games and that amount of years, it's beyond a fluke. It's a trend. Doesn't mean it has to continue, right?
Sure.
He may have learned. You hear about these coaches all the time, including Dan Quinn, say, they step away and then they figure out, well, what did I do right? What did I do that was wrong? I think based on the data, it seems that Cliff Kingsbury, comes out there and his offense is rolling, and then defenses make adjustments. Now in college football, it may be dependent too on, there's a lot of other factors. In college football, it might be, softer schedule at the beginning of the year. Then all of a sudden you start playing in your conference and you face the big boys and your stats are going to go down. But I do think there's something there. And so right now, you're seeing all these guys that know a lot more than any of us who break down the film, raving about Kingsbury's offense and the innovations, how they'll run these plays with all these different formations and looks. The defenses may catch up to it, right? So they may be getting this body of work, and you're going to face a defensive coordinator in a few weeks who's now seen a half of a season, and they're more prepared for it. So now it's, can Kingsbury then readjust and change things to stay ahead of it?
And we also talked about, sorry, Trev, we also talked about the trend for Cliff Kingsbury previously, especially in Arizona, was, he had DeAndre Hopkins left side in the exact same spot 90% of the time. He was last in the league in pre-snap motion for his time in Arizona. He's definitely not doing that this year. So it goes to your point that maybe he is learning. Maybe he is developing. You're never too old to develop, as you talked about with Dan Quinn. They're always trying to learn and get better. So maybe he's figured something out that it can't be too trendy for him.
And the truth is, this is what we don't know.
Yeah.
Hopkins may have said, hey, I like to line up on the left side.
Sure.
And it seemingly worked for him. The guy was a beast there, right?
He was a beast.
So maybe he's having to do different things here. He doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins. He has Olamide Zaccheaus. And he's figuring, well, what can I do to work with these guys? And so far, so good. But let's be honest. This doesn't happen if he's got Carson Wentz back there at quarterback, if he has Taylor Heineke at quarterback or Sam Howell at quarterback. He's had Jayden Daniels, and that has been the biggest difference. So on Sunday, can they beat the Bears with Marcus Mariota? They definitely can. But you have a far greater chance to win with a healthy Jayden Daniels. Does that mean that they beat Chicago with Jayden Daniels? No, because the way that I look at it, all right, so they've got the Giants after this, right? The Bears, the Giants, they're going to lose a game which we expect them to win. But they probably are going to win a game that we don't necessarily expect them to win. I think if this team could just go 500 the rest of the way, that's a 10-win team. Before the season started, I kept citing the Houston Texans, and my boys were killing me. Oh, the Texans turnaround. But every year there's a team. And then I wasn't brave enough. I was too much of a wuss to when I looked at that, when we actually went through the schedule, to say, well, the Commanders are going to be that team. Probably because I didn't know enough about Jayden Daniels. I'm not a huge college football guy.
Sure.
So, I didn't have faith that this team was going to be the team to have that Texans-like turnaround. But right now, they look like that team. And so all you really have to do is go 500. This team won 4 games last year.
Mm-hmm.
If I told you before the season started, hey, I'm going to give you 10, you take it. Absolutely take it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So all they're going to do is go 500. So obviously you would like to win against the Bears. I said before, kind of the psychological difference between 6-2 and 5-3. At 6-2, it feels like, man, it'd be tough to blow that.
Yeah.
But at 5-3, now all of a sudden the next game can't lose to the Giants, right?
Yeah, that's right.
They got to get one of these next 2. It'd be nice if they get it against the Bears at home, because the buzz, going back to what you were talking about, and I'm sure you feel this doing your show, just more people are interested.
Mm-hmm.
When the team wins, this is what I've said about our radio show for years. people would say, man, you guys just thrive on ripping on the Redskins. You guys thrive on the negativity. And I'd say, well, number one, we're not paid cheerleaders. And number two, they stink.
Yeah,
what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to say they're great when they're finishing 5-11, 6-10, 7-9, scraping out a 8-8 season or 9-7. Like, it is what it is. Like, we're going to keep it real, right? But what I also say is, when the team stinks and they're 4-12 or 4-13, look at the stands. Not that many Commanders fans go. Other teams are invading it. But when the team starts winning, you hear less complaints about the name. You hear less complaints about the stadium and the traffic. People want to go to the games. And all of a sudden, the environment is great. And that buzz is starting to grow. You know, the people that went to the game last week were talking about it, that the atmosphere was great. It was the alumni weekend. And so you want to see that momentum. You want to see it keep growing like a snowball, getting bigger and bigger.
So you mentioned earlier in the show, if Jayden plays, be cautious. What would that look like? Do we see a 2-quarterback system game coming up, like where Marcus makes more runs?
I don't think you do 2-quarterback system. I just mean be cautious that if the doctor said, hey, gave some sort of a warning and said, hey, this is what could happen if you put him out there. It's 50-50. He could re-tear something. Well, then you don't put him on the field. But if they say there's no reason to hold him back, he's 100%, he's healed, then you play him. I don't do a 2-quarterback system. Would you do a 2-quarterback system?
No. No, probably not. Would you change the game plan or the playbook maybe, like maybe less design quarterback runs, or would you change anything like that, or just don't change anything?
I'm a little torn on that. Like, I think that Jayden obviously is great scrambling. But part of his greatness, it is these quarterback runs. You watch Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense. Lamar's become a great passer. Look at 5 touchdown passes in this last game. But if you take away the legs, he's just less special. It's not to say he wouldn't be good. So maybe you limit it to an extent. Maybe you limit the runs up the middle where you think he's going to get hurt. Maybe you implement more kind of like bootlegs where you have the option to pass or option to run. Because if you put him on the perimeter and there's a linebacker who's like, okay, I either got to take the tight end behind me or I got to take Jayden, he's going to beat that 100 times out of 100. Linebacker comes up, he's going to throw it to the tight end. Linebacker drops back, then he's going to run. So maybe look, I'm not some offensive coordinator genius, but maybe you design more plays like that on the perimeter and stay away from the danger of running kind of up the middle with the big guys.
All right, JP, last question before we let you go. You got to give a prediction. I know it's way too early. We don't know if Jayden's playing or whatever. But, just for the sake of writing it down on some paper, who do you got in this Sunday for Commanders versus Bears?
I'm going to take the Commanders to win this game. You look at the Bears. Yes, they've won 3 in a row. And you hear this criticism about, well, who have the Commanders beaten? Who are the Bears beating?
That's right.
They're not necessarily beating anybody. It's a home game. Caleb has been playing better, but I don't think they have this world beater defense. Montez Sweat has 2.5 sacks. I think their leading sack guy has 4 sacks. I think they're going to be okay. With Marcus Mariota, I would be a little nervous. I think he probably peaked in that first game. I mean, with the 2 touchdown passes, he started off slow and then he was on fire.
Yeah.
But if Jayden's back healthy, I would say 75% confident. With Marcus Mariota, I'll say 50.1% confident
Just
that they win. But I think the Commanders get to 6-2, which will be pretty sweet.
All right, just give me a score then, just for the heck of it.
All right, let's go. Commanders 31, Bears 23.
Wow, that's fairly convincing. I like it.
I like that score.
Have you guys made your picks yet?
We're going to do
Not
that
yet.
right now. Trev, who you got, and what's your score?
I got the Commanders winning at home, going to 6-2. I got 27-19 Commanders.
That's still fairly convincing. I mean, that's within one score. Both of y'all got an 8-point spread. Definitely covering. The Bears are covering that. Look, I'm gonna ride the fence here a little bit. I'm gonna give you 2 scores. If Jayden plays, they win, and I think they do fairly well. I will say if he plays, they're gonna win 28-20, another 8-point score. But if Jayden's not playing, I'm going to have to go with Bears winning 30-17. That's if Mariota's playing, because I do not believe in Mariota. I believe Sunday was
Hold on a second. I'm a little confused. You gave the Bears more points if Mariota plays. So is that just based on like a pick six or turnovers?
Yes, exactly. Because I mean, they're third in the league in turnovers. They forced 13 turnovers already this year. So that's what they do really well. That's helped them out in a lot of these games. So yeah, I think if Mariota, he's going to give him the ball a couple of times and really stink. I just don't believe in him. It was very fluky.
Let me also give you this is kind of like an EB-ism.
All right.
He probably say they're the Bears. Right? He'd probably just say they're the Bears. But what I'd say is, does Matt Eberflus look like a 5-2 head coach?
No.
I think he does with the beard. He was smart to grow the beard this year. When he didn't have the beard, I was like, he's first to be fired this year. But he got the beard and they're winning, so there's might not be a coincidence.
Congratulations on 196.
Appreciate that.
It's a huge accomplishment. You guys do a great job. Always like jumping on with you. Make it look more and more professional every time I come on. So congratulations. Keep it going.
Awesome. Thanks. That's JP Flaim from 106.7 The Fan Sports Junkies every weekday morning, 6 to 10 a.m. and on Monumental Sports. If you want to watch them on TV, check them out on the Odyssey app as well. They put out their radio show. As I've said many times, I've never missed a single segment since 2007, February of 2007.
What are you doing with your life?
Never missed a single segment. Trust me, sometimes it's hard. I will fast forward through some of your interviews with certain guys, right? But never missed a segment since 2007. I appreciate you for coming on, JP.
All right, see you boys.
All right, take care.